All right, everybody, welcome back to class. There's still a few minutes until it's officially 2:30. Actually, only about a minute and a half. So sorry I'm arriving just close to the tail end before class starts. But anyway, it's good to see you guys and be here again. We're getting ready for our Wednesday meeting of Philosophy 105, Critical Thinking. So get comfortable, get ready. Feel free at any point to throw in some comments or say hello in the chat. And in just a bit here, we will definitely resume and get this lecture in. Good afternoon, Flavio. Hope you're doing good. And everybody else that I see, there's a few of us here in the meeting so far. Okay. Hey, hi. Hey, everybody. I'm doing good. Been a productive and busy first few weeks, but I'm feeling pretty good about it. Hi, everyone. Oh, the cats are doing great. Peachy's been jumping all over me all morning during these lectures, so I don't know if she might come over during the class lecture today. But yeah, they're great. Love those kitties. Hey guys, nice to see everyone. Okay, so welcome one and all. It's 2:30 right now. Let me just make sure that everyone, like in our class, is totally clear on the announcement. I'm gonna quickly shift over to Titanium and just send one message out so that everybody knows. I mean, we'll meeting method the whole semester. We're going to YouTube Live during class. But just to make sure we get max attendance, I'm gonna double that by putting in a quick announcement right now. So just give me 2 seconds to do that. I'm in another window. Okay, cool. Hey, everybody. Thanks for all your kind words and etc. Just putting this message here. Sorry, just putting the right link for everybody. I need to open one more window so that I can do that the proper way. Okay, cool. Just wanted to get that in there for sure. Oops. All right, yeah, cool. Sorry, back to the meeting. All right, everybody. So yes, good afternoon. Good to see you guys. Draw a bird again. It's not going to be any better than last time, unfortunately. My artistic skills, if anything, they've declined since last meeting. So, but yeah, all right. So let me go back to some of our notes to review. First off, we'll see if the cats show up. One of them's over there playing around. Maybe they'll come in. Okay, so it's all about critical thinking. We started by just talking about what is a good or a bad critical thinker. Good critical thinkers demand good evidence and arguments before they're going to be willing to believe a claim. And when they make claims to others, they produce good evidence and arguments to support their own views. On the other hand, bad critical thinkers lack those capacities. They believe they believe statements and claims, even when there's no kind of good argument to base it. And when they make claims to other people, they don't usually have any kind of good argument or evidence to back themselves up. We then talked about what are arguments. Arguments are sets of 2 or more sentences where one statement is the conclusion and all the others are premises. And in an argument, the whole point is that you're trying to show that that conclusion is true, and the premises relate to that because they're the evidence and the support that's supposed to back up the conclusion. When you write an argument out in standard form, the conclusion is given at the bottom, and the premises are listed above that, and there's a horizontal line that separates the two from the premises and the conclusion. Each premise is supposed to be on its own individual line, and then the conclusion is, again, at the bottom. The whole point of making the arguments is to demonstrate or display that the conclusion is true. We talked about how the word truth means when whatever a statement says matches the world and the facts of reality. So if I'm wearing a button-up, it's just that's true right now because that's a fact and it's not just what I've said. So whenever a statement matches the world, it's a true statement. Hi, Raymond, and everyone else. I guess, like, for example, the statement that you're watching a live stream lecture. If you're watching this right now, then of course that's true. So anyway, some statements are true, some are false. What's the difference? Whichever ones match the way the world is. Otherwise, they're not true. Like if I said that I was 7 foot tall, it's just not true because that's not the fact. But it's something that one could say, in which case they'd say something false. Now, to believe something, to have a belief, is simply to think that a statement is true. So to think that it mirrors reality or reflects the facts. So if a person believes that there's aliens in outer space, then they think that that's something that's really going on outside in the world. In other words, that that's true. If a person says, no, I'm a skeptic, I don't think there's anything out there besides us, then they would say the statement that there's aliens, they don't believe it. They don't believe that it's really a fact. Okay, one second, I gotta shut a door over here. Okay. Then we all talked about deduction and induction, but there's one thing that I'm not sure, I want to make sure I didn't leave behind. Can anybody tell me this? Did I make a mention to you guys of what is an asetoric sentence? Did I do that? I feel like I might not have, but maybe I did. An asetoric sentence, like different types of sentences. You can let me know. If I didn't cover that, then I just want to add that to our notes really fast. I did? Okay, very good. Thank you, guys. Yeah, so there's different types of sentences. You have what are called asetoric sentences. That's a sentence that's either true or false. Then you have imperatives. Those are commands. You have interrogatives, which are questions. And you have exclamations, which are just random like interjections that give a sense of a person's current emotional state or attitude. Okay. We then mentioned the difference between deduction and induction, and that takes us closer to the material for today. So basically, with the deduction type of argument or deductive reasoning, when you have a good deductive argument, the terminology is that it's considered a deductively valid argument. So if an argument's deductively valid, what that means is that if the premises are true, if they're true, doesn't mean that they necessarily always have to be, but like if they were true, then in that case, the conclusion would have to be as well. Okay, so you know you're looking at a deductively valid argument if it's impossible for the premises to be true and still have the false conclusion. So, you know, like I'm older than you and you're older than, who's like a prominent child out there that we all know of, kind of not so up on child actors and stuff. But anyway, I'm older than you, and let's say you're older than your little sister if you had one, just for the sake of discussion. In that case, the conclusion that I'm older than your little sister, the cat, okay, good example, my cats, thanks, perfect. So I'm older than you and you're older than my cat, because this cat is like just turned 5 months old. I'm older than you, you're older than my cat, so therefore I am older than my cat. Doesn't that make sense? Because of the older than relation, you know? It's not possible for the two statements of premises to be true, and yet my cat is older than me. That's impossible. So, you know, just different examples of deductively valid arguments. Now with a sound argument, another distinction, when an argument is sound, what does this mean? It means that it's both got deductive validity, but on top of that, the little extra feature is that it's all the premises are true. Okay, so it's a deductively valid argument where all the premises are actually factually true. So if I say all dogs could fly and Lassie is a dog, the conclusion of that would be Lassie can fly, therefore. Now that would be valid. It would be valid just because of the logic of the conclusion following from the statement of the premises. But it's not sound because of the obvious fact that dogs can't fly, not even one, much less all dogs. So considering that argument, we see that it's both valid but not sound. If I say to you that, I don't know, all dogs are mammals and Lassie, or I don't know, like a Labrador is a dog, then in that case, the conclusion that Labradors are mammals would, of course, follow and be validly derived from the premises, but it's also sound because the premises are really true. Okay, and then after that, we made a mention of induction, and what is it for an argument to be inductively strong? Okay, so who remembers that, just by the way? For an argument to be inductively strong, what does that actually mean? Inductively strong. Let me know. Inductively strong? Just a question for you. What's the term inductively strong mean? Peachy. She's like attacking my shirt. I gotta stop this cat. Okay. Yeah. So no, Jasmine, premises are all true is the definition of sound. Okay. Inductively strong means that if the premises are true, then the conclusion is likely to be true. Exactly. So with induction, you have a conclusion that's likely or probable in case the premises are true. With deduction, you have a conclusion that is necessarily true, and it has to be if the premises are. So that's the difference between deduction and induction. And Araceli also know. Premises being all true refers to the term soundness. Induction has nothing to do with soundness. Inductive arguments are just about when the conclusion is probable. It's probably going to be true if the premises are true, but it's not necessarily so. So if I told you that, let's see, I've never, let's see, been shot in my life, or it would probably be a good inductively strong argument, because if we added information in the premises, like about how long I've lived over 30 years, then the conclusion seems pretty reasonable, because if something hasn't happened in 30 years, it probably won't happen today either. But we can't say that that's something that we know with total certainty. So that would be an inductively strong argument. The sun has always come up for billions of years, so it will come up tomorrow. That would be another example. I remember when I was learning logic, I had this funny example given to me by one of my professors. It was something about like a chicken that's been fed every morning of its life. Okay, now, if chickens could do logic, and if they could reason through induction, which maybe they do informally, but if suppose they were able to actually like think about these arguments in depth, suppose the chicken had this argument in its mind. Every day of my whole life, I've been given food by this farmer. So tomorrow, he's going to feed me again. Depending on how long the chicken's been alive, that's probably a pretty strong argument inductively. But the thing is, what if this farmer is just fattening the chicken up over time, so eventually he can slaughter and eat the chicken? One day, then, this induction that it's relying on is going to break. But of course, that's how induction works. It's possible for the conclusion to turn out to turn out false, but it's just likelier than not that it will be true. Okay. Now, next of all, let me give you guys quick examples of some of these arguments that would not be good, okay? Like arguments that fail to be either valid or inductively strong. Okay, so like, how about this? She just really like wants to hang out with me right now, so unfortunately, I hate to disappoint you and her and everybody, but I'm gonna have to put her over here in the other room. Just give me 2 seconds. All right, Peachy. She wants to be like a YouTube star. She just can't get enough attention. All right. Hi, Peach. I put you here. Okay, yeah. We'll see if I get a chance to open the door and let her back in a while. But yeah, back to the argument I was trying to write. So just whatever. Trump is a man. And therefore, Trump is the president. Okay, I have a question for you. Is that argument valid? Is that a valid argument? What you see written on the board? Trump is a man, therefore Trump is the president. Okay, so Matthew, no. Larissa, no. Natalie, no. Exactly, you guys are correct. It's not valid. This is an invalid argument. But are those statements both true? Are they both true? Yes, they're both true. So I want you to just recognize something. Simply just having all the statements being true is not enough for validity. No, I'm sorry to those that are saying yes. It is not valid. It is an invalid argument, okay? And let me just, again, try and explain why. This conclusion is not implied by this premise, okay? So when it's deductively valid, that means that if the premise is true, the conclusion has to be true. And that's not so here. Trump is a man, true enough. But he didn't need to be the president just because he's a man, you know? So just because somebody is a man, that does not imply that they're the president of the United States. Otherwise, every single man would be a president of the United States at some time, right? So this premise being true, it does not mean that this has to be also. Of course, it's possible for this to be true and this to be false. In fact, you know, before Trump was elected, and maybe if he loses or if his term expires, of course, then this would be false. So just having this premise here as a true statement does not logically imply this conclusion. So I need you guys to understand then that whether the premise and the conclusion is true is not what you're looking at when you're trying to judge whether the argument is valid or not. To determine whether it's valid or not, you have to see whether or not the premises logically imply the conclusion. That means, do these premises guarantee that the conclusion is true? And of course, the answer here is no. Though Trump is a man, that does not guarantee that he became president. Would it be true if the statements were switched? No. Because being president also does not imply that you're a man. A woman can be president. As you all know, women have run for president and just have not, let's say, won the whole election. But if we had it reversed, it would say Trump is the president, therefore Trump is a man. I'm talking about man in the sense not of like mankind, but rather like male, like biologically male or whatever, gender and stuff like that. So just because he was president does not imply that he's a man. There could be Mary Trump or somebody who becomes the president. And in that case, it would be true that somebody named Trump is the president, but not necessarily that that person is a man. Okay, so this argument is invalid. That's an invalid argument, all right? Now, let me give you another case. Okay, so all dogs can talk. Let's say Drake is a dog. What would be the conclusion of that argument? Easy enough. All dogs can talk. Drake is a dog. So, therefore, deduction, Drake can talk. Okay, now is this argument valid or not valid? Good, we got the conclusion, that's correct. Now I'm asking this question, is it a valid argument? And yes, it is. It is valid. It's valid just because this conclusion logically follows from these premises. Once again, if these two premises are assumed as truths, then this statement would have to result from them. The thing about this argument is not that it's invalid. It is valid, but it's not, what's the other term in this argument that we see here? The thing that is, if anything, problematic about it, it's not sound. Not sound. You getting me? It's not sound. So it's valid, but it's not sound. And the reason that it's not sound is because if it's a sound argument, let's remember this, that means what? That all of the premises are true. Sound arguments are valid arguments, but they also have to have every single premise being really true. So it's not sound, and the reason is because of, well, both premises are false, right? Drake is not a dog. No dogs can talk, but if all dogs can talk, and if Drake is a dog, then it does logically follow through deduction that Drake can talk, okay? So in this case, I'm showing you a case of a valid argument where the premises are false. And you can have invalid arguments where all the premises are true. So remember again that the concept of validity is nothing to do with the actual truth or falsehood of the premises. Validity can be established just by considering the logic and the logical connection of the premises and conclusion. If the conclusion is something that is a consequence logically of the premise statements, then that's a valid argument, regardless of if the premises say weird, false, or just bizarre things. Okay? That doesn't mean that every valid argument contains weird premises like these, because just a normal argument like all dogs are mammals and Labradors are dogs, therefore Labradors are mammals, that's valid too. It's just that that's a case where the valid argument is sound. Okay, so just be alert to the possibility of valid but not sound arguments. And also recognize that just because every statement in an argument is true is not enough for it to be valid if the conclusion doesn't follow from the premises. Another example, just quickly, and I'll just speak it. Trump is the president, therefore the sky is blue. Is that valid? No. But both statements are true. And so hopefully you understand that when there's no relevance or connection between the premise and the conclusion, if the conclusion is not proven by the premise, then even if the premise and the conclusion are true, the argument is invalid. Okay. There could also be bad inductive arguments. There could be inductively weak arguments. I think we talked about those last time, so I don't have much more to say about it, but an inductively weak argument is just any argument where the inductive conclusion is not very likely, even if the premises are true. So if I told you that, I don't know, a stranger gave me a compliment, it's just one case, one occasion, I cannot really make a very strong inference that a stranger will give me a compliment tomorrow as well, right? Now, if I had been getting these compliments continuously over the period of days, weeks, months, then maybe I would be able to say, since I've been getting a compliment from a stranger every day for like a year, then I'll get one tomorrow. Jamie, you say that there's a little lag. I'm not sure. Can anyone else confirm, or is it really just the one computer? Sometimes individuals' Wi-Fi connection or data speeds can lag a little bit. When you say lag, does it mean that my audio cuts out? Is it good now? If it's just for a few seconds and the overall flow of our discussion is still being carried over, then it's probably fine. It's bound to happen occasionally, and it's not unprecedented, but I think that we should be in pretty good shape now, okay? Every 15 minutes or so, it freezes for a few seconds. That's all right. And by the way, when you go back to review and replay any sections of this after it uploads when I finish the lecture, you'll see the entire lecture straight through, and all the sections will be recorded and included. Okay, so we just do the best we can. Obviously, we're in a virtual environment now, so that's something that occasionally happens. But do let me know, and if there's anything that gets lost, I can easily go back and repeat it. Okay, thank you. So yeah, I was just mentioning like an inductively weak argument. I was basically saying something random that happens, you know, like out of the blue, and it's not a common occasion, a common occurrence, like a stranger giving you a compliment. You know, think of when's the last time that happened to you. I mean, people are nice, sometimes you get those, but it's not every day usually. So if I got a compliment randomly today or something, I couldn't use that as good enough evidence to say it's going to happen tomorrow. So you need patterns for an inductively strong argument. Random coincidences, chance events are not likely to repeat. So I don't know, I stepped on a $5 bill as I was walking through the neighborhood yesterday. That's not something that I can say, therefore it's going to happen again tomorrow, because it's not something that occurs with any reliability. Okay, so then today, to continue from there, I want to talk to you guys about what are some different types of deductively valid argument. That's the next lesson. So deductively valid arguments are arguments where if the premises are true, then the conclusion also has to be. But there's a few different forms of deductively valid argument that exist. And by knowing what the form of a deductively valid argument is, you can then generate examples quite easily just using the form and the format of a deductively valid argument. So we're going to today learn 4 forms of deductively valid argument. If we can, we'll try to go through all 4. This is a better marker here. Okay, 4 forms of deductively valid argument. So the first of these 4 forms is what is called the disjunctive syllogism. Okay? So we start with this concept, disjunctive syllogism. Okay, so the word syllogism just refers to a deductively valid argument that contains 2 premises. That's kind of just a classic word used in logic. So syllogisms are valid arguments with 2 premises. Some of those kind of arguments we've already been looking at, but now we're going to specify this particular kind. So the disjunctive syllogism has 2 premises that lead to the conclusion. So the standard form is going to be set up like that. Within a disjunctive syllogism, there's a statement which is called a disjunction in it. Okay, so we have to now all comprehend what is a disjunction. This is just terminology that refers to a type of sentence that is what we call an or sentence. Okay, so what's a disjunction? That is an or, let me say it this way, an either or sentence or statement. An either or sentence. Okay, just bracketing that over here so it doesn't get in the way of the other notes. But a disjunction is an either or sentence. Let me put that in the chat as well. Okay, so when you ever say something along the lines of this or that, for some this and that, you're using a disjunction. Okay, so now we're familiarizing ourselves with this term. So like, for example, I could say to you, I will either watch this lecture on YouTube Live, or I will play Nintendo Switch, right? That's an either or. That's a disjunction. And in every disjunction, there are 2, as they are called, disjuncts. They're the 2 terms that are to the left and right of the word or. So if I say I will either attend the lecture or play the Switch, what's the first disjunct of that disjunction? So like, just testing your knowledge so far. A disjunction is an or sentence. There are 2 disjuncts in every disjunction. So in the example I gave, I'll either watch lecture or play Switch. The first disjunct, correct, Hannah, is that I will watch or go to the lecture. Also correct, Marissa. And the second disjunct in that statement would be that I will play the Switch. Okay? So that's just one example, but it could be any number of possible things. I will either have pizza or tacos for lunch. I will either go to the movies or read a book. I will either major in chemistry or biology. I will either wear a polo or a sweater with my outfit. So, you know, there's infinitely many possible disjunctions, but the concept of the disjunction is what is seen in all the examples. It's an either or statement. Okay, so now knowing what a disjunction is, we can fill in this form. So a disjunctive syllogism type argument begins with a disjunction. And I'm going to label the 2 disjuncts with just variables so that they can stand as general placeholders for whatever the individual disjunct might be. Okay, so in the first premise of a disjunctive syllogism, we have a sentence that goes either A or B. Okay, now these letters, these capitalized letters A and B, they are just placeholders that are standing for whatever the individual disjuncts are in a given case. So like in my example mentioned just prior, I will either watch the lecture or play the switch. A is the first disjunct, and so in that case, A is substituting for I'll watch lecture. And B, the right-hand disjunct, the second one, would be in place of I'll play the switch. Okay, now with the disjunctive syllogism, the second premise, after the first one, is simply to negate one of the two disjuncts, okay? So that means that it is stated on the second line that not either A or B, like not one of the two things. So let's suppose, for example, the case is not A. So now maybe you can deduce on your own what should be the conclusion of this form, either A or B, but not A. So therefore, what? What can be concluded? Therefore, well, you say I will be, I understand that, Natalie, but in some cases, B might not have to do with an action that I will take. It could just be an event that will occur. So in either case, in any ways, yes, it's B. That's right. Therefore, B. So this is the generic form of the disjunctive syllogism. And with this format, there's, any number of examples that could be created. Either I will either I will go to lecture or play the switch. I will not go to lecture, therefore I'm going to play the switch. I will either have pizza or tacos for my lunch, but they're out of pizza, so therefore it's going to be tacos. I will either get a new puppy or a kitten, but I wasn't able to get a puppy, and so therefore I got a kitten. I don't want it to seem difficult. In a way, it's pretty straightforward. Disjunctive syllogism is a type of deductively valid argument which has got this format. Why is it called disjunctive syllogism? Because it uses a disjunction, and because it's a deductively valid syllogism with two premises. Okay? Any questions about it to this point so far? I have a little more to say about it, but I like to pause from time to time to see if there's anything that's not clear that I could help with. But I guess you'll let me know if there is. So far, okay, good. Now, let me add some other information on this. There's a second possible way that the disjunctive syllogism can be presented. So another possibility is this, and I think you'll understand quickly what I'm going for here. So the disjunction on premise 1 says either A or B for some terms or disjuncts A and B. One case is when we proceed from there to say not A, therefore B. But another possible way of proceeding would be the opposite. In this instance, it would say not B. And if that was the type of pattern of the argument, then what would be the conclusion in this instance? So what we have so far is either A or B and not B. So now, therefore, A is our conclusion, correct? Okay, so basically, it's whenever it is the second disjunct that has been eliminated, then it is the first one that you conclude with. So I will either major in the humanities or the sciences, but the sciences were just too hard, and so I took on a humanities major. I will either wear Adidas or Nikes, but I decided to not wear the Air Force Ones, so I'm wearing Adidas. These are just examples for you, but I hope that it's something that you can think about and just understand. So with the disjunctive syllogism, it's possible to have either case. It just depends on which of the two sides here is eliminated in the second premise. And that actually reminds me of one thing I want to mention. The disjunctive syllogism has a kind of like a separate AKA second name, a second label that is sometimes used to refer to it. So a synonym for disjunctive syllogism is the term argument from elimination. So I'm putting that here in parentheses, argument from elimination. So let me get rid of this part up here because we've all taken view of what the topic is. We're going over 4 forms of deductively valid syllogisms. This is the first of the 4. But anyway, yeah, it's also sometimes labeled argument from elimination, this argument. And the reason for that is because the second premise of the disjunctive syllogism eliminates one of the disjuncts, like negating one of them. So if you have 2 possibilities, but one of them has been eliminated, then the other one is the only possibility left. You know, either Smith or Jones committed the murder, but we've seen now that Jones was couldn't possibly have been there. You know, he has receipts that show that he was somewhere else, so it must have therefore been Smith. It's called an argument from elimination once again because of the negation that you see on line 2. Now I want to add this point as well. This is something that sometimes confuses students. So later on, like when you take quizzes or when you do homeworks or tests, whatever, that ask you about this information, most of the time students will get it right. But once in a while, I've noticed that a couple students can sometimes confuse this idea and make a little error. So I want to try and help you avoid making that mistake if I can. All right, so the most common error that comes back to me when students are reporting on this topic is that they'll make this error. So let me show you a mistake. Okay, so suppose that somebody has argued in this way. Either A or B, so far so good, no problem there. But suppose that then they follow that by saying A and therefore not B. Okay, now understand why a student might, put this info down. Because they're just thinking that as long as you know one of them is true, then you can deny the other one. That's actually incorrect. It has to be in the precise order mentioned before this. So this is not valid, and that would be incorrect as an example of you reporting on how the form goes. It has to be a negation on line 2, and therefore the conclusion is something that is affirmatively stated. You can't affirm one of the disjuncts and then conclude that the other one must be true. But if one of them has been eliminated, then you can conclude that the other one is true. Okay? And here's the reason for that. It's because in logic, we use what is called the inclusive or. All right? In everyday speech, though, we usually think of or as being in the exclusive sense. So let me explain that. The everyday usage of the word or seems to involve the exclusive sense of or, but in logic, it's the inclusive sense. The exclusive sense of or means that when you say A or B, you mean by that exactly one of them and not both, right? So like if a person says to you, today I'm either going to get pizza or tacos for lunch, you think that means that they're going to get either pizza and not tacos, or tacos and not pizza. Like they're going to get exactly one but not both of the 2 options. That would be the exclusive or. Like when I said I'll get one or the other, I mean that if I do get one, that excludes the other. But in logic, we employ what's called the inclusive or. And the grammar of the word or is inclusive when you really look at it. Which means then that if a person says, I will either get pizza or tacos for lunch, that could be true in 3 ways, okay? One way that could be true is if they get the pizza, right? If I say to you, I'm gonna either have pizza or tacos, and you come to my lunch table and you see me with pizza, you can't say you lied to me because I'm eating one of the 2 things, and I didn't say I would have both. I said I would have one or the other. If you come by my table and you don't see pizza, but you see tacos there, once again, I didn't speak anything false because my claim was I'll either have pizza or tacos. What you wouldn't perhaps expect is to come across my table and see me with both pizza and tacos on the table. But that is in fact consistent with saying that I will either have pizza or tacos. So both is an option when a person says either. That is why, from the assertion of A, we cannot deduce that not B, because it's possible that both A and B. Now, what is the only way that you could say that I spoke falsely when I said that I would either have pizza or tacos for lunch? If you came by my lunch table and you observed me and what you see, what would you have to see for it to be false that I would have had pizza or tacos for lunch? What would be a situation that would render that false if I had neither one exactly? If you saw me eating like a hamburger, then you would say, okay, you misinformed me when you said you were either going to have pizza or tacos, because this is not either one. So from the fact that one of the two cases has been eliminated, the other one has to be true for this to be true. But from the fact that one of them has been affirmed, we cannot necessarily deduce that the other one is false. Okay? So this is invalid. And the only form that is valid is when the second premise either denies A or denies B, and then we can infer to the other disjunct. Okay? So I'm just trying to ward off a common error. You know, like on a quiz, it could say, provide an example of disjunctive syllogism. And if you're thinking about that question and you write down, I will either study math or science. I studied science, so I didn't study math. That would be incorrect. Okay? So just remember that because of the inclusive or, we can only reason from an elimination to the affirmation of the other disjunct. But we cannot do it in the reverse way. Okay? Because we hold open the possibility for both disjuncts to be true. All right? Cool. So any questions on the disjunctive syllogism for the moment? I'm happy to take any questions anytime. But this is what I've got so far on this one. I'll always be that, so just checking in with you to make sure there's nothing that's been left out or unclear. Okay, but I told you that we're learning, yeah, so either can mean both. That's correct, Natalie. It doesn't say that they both will happen, but it leaves open the possibility of both. So correct also, Brittany, that second premise must say not in order for it to be a correct example of the disjunctive syllogism. It has to negate, eliminate, as this should help you remember, argument from elimination. So something has to be eliminated here on line 2, not affirmed, but denied. And then we can conclude with the other disjunct. So just to make sure that your eyes are not only looking at the incorrect version, remember this is how it's supposed to be. Either A or B, not A. So therefore, B. This is the correct, valid representation of the disjunctive syllogism. And you say, Jamie, so using that example from the quiz, what about if it's like I was going to do math or science, but I got bored of math, so I did science? Yes, exactly, Jamie. That's fine. It can be one, or it can be both. So if you say I'm going to study either math or science, and you ended up not doing math, then the conclusion of the argument would be, therefore, I did science. That's fine. I'm not saying that because it's inclusive or that in every single case it means to indicate both. It just holds open the possibility. So if I tell you that I'm going to either major in math or science, and then you find out that I took on a double major, then in fact I still spoke the truth because I did major in either math or science. I did both. But if I do one and not the other, that's also consistent with saying either A or B. So what would be wrong if you said, from the quiz, what about if it's like I was going to do math or science, but I got bored of math, so I did science? What is your exact question that if I asked you, okay, I was going to do math or science, I did math, so I didn't do science? That's incorrect. That would be incorrect. Yes, Jamie, thank you. So if the second premise claims that you took one of those two majors, we cannot infer that you did not do the other one because you could have chosen to double major. But if you said that you're going to do one of the two, and I learned that you chose not to do one, then in order for it to even be true that you're going to do one or the other, it must be the other one. You understand? The only thing that makes it false is the case where you don't major in either one, like you major in philosophy instead of math or science. You see? So in order to falsify a disjunction, both disjuncts must be false. Thus, knowing that one of them is true cannot allow us to conclude necessarily that the other one is false. Okay, very good. So thank you for your question. All right then, so now I'm going to help you guys, if I can, to understand the other types of deductively valid argument. Okay, so we're going to learn 3 more types of deductively valid argument, but these 3 are members of a common family, if you will. They're all what we call hypothetical syllogisms, but there are 3 different hypothetical syllogisms. Okay, so like the superheading here will be hypothetical syllogisms, but there are 3 particular varieties of that. Okay, so hypothetical syllogisms, and there are 3 members of this little family. The thing that unifies the 3 is that they each one include what are called hypotheticals. Now, hypotheticals, also sometimes called conditionals, that's another type of sentence in logic and in language. So as I just told you guys, the disjunction is the either-or sentence. The hypothetical is what we call an if-then sentence. So here we go. That is an if-then sentence. All right, so let me give you some examples of hypotheticals. If I run, then I will sweat. If I don't know, stub my toe, then it will hurt. If I drop the marker, then it will fall. If Trump wins re-election, then he'll construct a border wall. If Biden wins re-election, then he'll expand the Obamacare program, the National Health Care Program, the ACA. So these are all different examples of if-then statements. If I turn the key, then the car will start. If I water the plants, then they will grow. Okay? So those are all just if-thens. And looking a little more deeply into the structure of these so-called hypotheticals, they each contain 2 parts. So how a disjunction has 2 disjuncts, the left and the right term, A and B, there's also 2 parts to hypothetical sentences, and they have got labels. So take, for example, this sentence. I'm going to erase the heading up here. Okay, so first of all, the antecedent is one part of the conditional, or the hypothetical, and the other part is called the consequent. So the antecedent of the hypothetical is called, it's the if part of the statement. And the consequent of a hypothetical is the then clause. Okay. Yes, Larissa, this is the second of our 4 forms. Correct. So we already learned disjunctive syllogism, but I have not yet written the name of any of these 3 kinds because I'm first just describing to you what are hypotheticals and what the concept of a hypothetical syllogism is. But there's 3 specific kinds of hypothetical syllogisms. So you're going to write the name of it down in just a moment, but I'm starting by just trying to tell you how hypotheticals are built. Okay, so just here's the point. A hypothetical is an if-then sentence. For example, if I run, then I will sweat. If I turn the key, the car will start. And the 2 parts of the hypothetical are the antecedent and the consequent. So in this example here, consider this statement. If I run, then in that case, I will sweat. What's the antecedent of this sentence? What would you say is the antecedent there? Hopefully, now that the terminology is there and we have an example, it should come out clearly. The antecedent of this case is what? That I run. Good, exactly. So running is the antecedent. Antecedent kind of means what comes first. What is the antecedent factor? Consequent is what is the result that comes from the antecedent happening or being true. So anyway, what's the consequent of this example then? You're right. The antecedent is I run. And the consequent in this hypothetical would be that I will sweat or I sweat. Exactly. Now that that's all in your mind, I'm going to tell you about one of our three types of hypothetical syllogism. Okay? I had to set this up by first revealing to you what is a hypothetical, what are the two parts of it. It's kind of like cause and effect, Miguel, but in some cases, it might not be that the antecedent causes it, but that it's just something that allows you to infer that the consequent is true. Like, for example, if I am in California, then I'm in the United States. That's not so much cause and effect, but a containment relation. So both are possible, that the antecedent causes the consequent, or it could simply be that given that the antecedent is true, the consequent logically results from it or must be true too. Okay, now we're going to talk about the first of the three types of hypothetical syllogism. And so now, as I saw previously from Larissa, now we are actually adding the next form of deductively valid syllogism. So this one is called Modus Tollens. Modus Tollens. M-O-D-U-S P-O-N-E-N-S. That's an old through this era, and it refers to this type of hypothetical syllogism. So it's got two premises that lead to the conclusion, okay? Here's how this goes. So the first premise of modus ponens is a hypothetical, which just says something of the form, if A, then B. If A, then, in that case, B. All right. Now, as the argument continues from there, the second premise just says it affirms the antecedent. And so it simply says A. So what can you deduce here? I think if you're thinking logically, it'll be pretty straightforward. So the two pieces of info that are written say if A, then B. And then after that, A. So what follows? If A, then B. And by the way, A is true. So therefore what? B, correct. B is the logical conclusion. So, for example, let me say how this could go. If I run, then I will sweat. And I ran. So therefore, I sweated. If I turn the key, the car will start. I turned the key, therefore the car started. If I'm in California, then I'm in the United States. I am in California, and therefore I'm in the United States. Okay, so that's what we call modus ponens, and it has to have this particular format. There's a secondary name for modus ponens, just like I told you that disjunctive syllogism is sometimes also referred to as argument from elimination. Modus ponens is also sometimes referred to by a second name, which is affirming the antecedent. Affirming the antecedent. Now, it's called that because of the second premise, where the antecedent is affirmed. And that's what leads us through to the conclusion of the consequent. It's important to recognize, though, that it's only the antecedent that is to be affirmed in the second premise. It's never correct to do it in the opposite way, all right? So I told you about a common mistake with disjunctive syllogism that sometimes a student can make, and that would be to think that you can affirm one of the disjuncts and then conclude with the denial of the other one. In this case, the most common mistake that I see, so I'm going to put up an invalid, incorrect way of presenting this so that you try not to make that mistake. I'll cross it out so that you see that's wrong and that's not the way to do it. This is correct. This is a correct instance of modus ponens, or affirming the antecedent. So this is what you want when you are asked to present modus ponens. But here's what's a wrong way of doing it. So this would be incorrect and invalid if we had an argument as follows. If A, then B, and then someone writes B, therefore A. This is not valid. And it's not affirming the antecedent. This is affirming the consequent, which is not the right logical inference move. Let me explain why this is not valid. Take this example. If I am in California, then I am in the United States. So far, so good. But imagine that the next thing I say is, I'm in the United States. Do those two things imply that I'm in California? No. Why not? Because just because I'm in the United States, that doesn't mean that I have to be in the state of California. I could be in any other of the 49 states. Now, if it had been the other way around, then we would have had a valid argument, because everywhere inside of California is somewhere within the US, but not the other way around. Not everywhere in the US is something within California. So if I had reasoned in this way, I would be committing a fallacy, and that's an invalid inference. And it should hopefully be clear enough to you. If I'm in California, then I'm in the US. I am in California, therefore I'm in the US. But I cannot go in the other direction and say that if I'm in California, then I'm in the US. I'm in the US, so therefore I'm in California. Being in California does not follow from being in the US, even though California is a part of the US. Okay? Let's see. If I run, then I will sweat. Now you might think, okay, well, if I continue by saying I sweat, doesn't it mean that I'm running? No, not necessarily. Because the person who's sweating could have been sweating from lifting weights, from getting really nervous. So there's many ways to sweat that are not involving running. So just because sweating comes from running doesn't mean that every time you sweat, you necessarily ran. But what can be safely concluded is that in case a person sweats whenever they run, from the fact that they ran, we can infer that they did. We can deduce that they sweated. Okay, so you basically have to continue from line 1 in the proper way to have an accurate example of modus ponens. It's affirming the antecedent on line 2, not the consequent. So just know that there is not a correct way of representing that type of argument. Let's see some of you real fast. How about hit me with a quick modus ponens argument in the chat? Anybody that can think of one. And, you know, it doesn't matter what the case is, just something off the top of your head, just freestyling. What do you think could be an example of a modus ponens argument? I just want to see you come up with a few, and then I can make sure that it's something that sank in a little bit. So I'll just take what I see coming in to the chat here. I know it takes a minute or so, you know, for you to think of something and then type it up. So I'll just patiently wait, you know, for a few seconds. Okay. So Matteo's a little bit not enough, though. I don't know if you intended to continue with the remainder of the argument, but also Hannah, it's not enough. The argument, how many statements is in an argument, first of all? You guys have both given me one sentence, and as we all know, every argument is at minimum 2 sentences. Furthermore, we've just written down some examples of the format. So also the same with you, Eric. It's not correct. You guys are giving me individual hypotheticals, but I need you to give me modus ponens, the entire argument. So write the full argument out. You guys are just writing the first premise. Okay, so Edward, if I get a job, then I will get money. I got a job, therefore I got money. Ah, very good. Yes, that's correct. Hannah, if I study, then I will do well on the test. I studied, so I will do well on the test. That's also a good example. Alondra, if I visit the beach, then it's summer. I visited the beach, therefore it's summer. Interesting. Is that sound? You would only visit the beach in the summer? Maybe so. Okay, and that's another good example. Matthew, if I'm in Dallas, then I'm in Texas. I'm in Dallas, and therefore I'm in Texas. Good examples all around. Okay, so yeah, just understand, guys, that when you were writing out an example of this type of argument, or any argument, you cannot just leave it at one sentence. It's okay, not to worry, Mateo, I understand, but that's part of what I'm trying to make clear. The first few times as we get practiced, you know, you're working with the concepts for the first time in your life, but it sinks in and it becomes something that is easy enough to remember. Okay, cool. So Natalie's example, if I light the candle, right, then it will smell good. I lighted the candle and therefore it smells good. Very good. Yes, that's the right kind of example to give. If today is Wednesday, then I will attend class. Today is Wednesday, therefore I'll go to class. Also a fair example. Okay, guys, so I like that. You've shown me that you can work with the concept and correctly produce examples of it. Yeah, so I'm trying to think of, you know, what's problematic about the invalid, mistaken examples. If I got shot, maybe that's, if I was beheaded, then I would die. And then suppose, well, it can't be the first person. So if Jones is beheaded, then Jones is dead. And Jones is dead, therefore he's beheaded. That doesn't follow. Because even though beheading would have killed him for sure, just based on the fact that he's dead, we can't reason backwards to the cause. But from the fact that he was beheaded, we could certainly deduce that he's died, but not in the opposite case, because there's, you know, a million ways to die, as they say. Okay. Yeah, not to worry, Mateo. I understand. It's just we're doing our best and we're making little progress as we continue. Okay. So we have two more hypothetical syllogisms to go over. Maybe I'll get to cover both of them. I'm going to try with the remaining time. And if I don't, then we'll just pick it up when we resume next week on Wednesday. Because remember, Monday is a school holiday for Labor Day, so we have a little bit of extra time. Involves the types of deductively valid argument forms that we're learning today. So if I can finish with it today, then I'll distribute the homework for you guys. If, for example, I need more time to finish this lesson at the beginning of next class, then I'm going to move the due date out just slightly to give you additional time after I finish those notes. All right. So next type of hypothetical syllogism, the third of our four forms that we're learning today, is called Modus Tollens. Modus Tollens, M-O-D-U-S-T-O-L-L-E-N-S, Modus Tollens. This argument also is a hypothetical syllogism, so it starts with the same type of hypothetical sentence. So the first premise of Modus Tollens is that if A, then B. So that much is the same. But after that, the Modus Tollens argument goes in a slightly different direction. So the second premise of Modus Tollens says not B. So it denies the consequent. Now maybe this will take just a moment to consider for you, but think about it. If I have these two statements, what follows from them? If A, then B, but not B. And so therefore what? If A, then B would be the case, but B is not the case. So therefore, not A, that's right, Hannah and Judy and the rest, not A is our conclusion, okay? Crazy hands, I don't know. Not A. Okay. So the logic here. If we have a conditional which says that in case A is true, then B is true, and then we continue by saying, but B is false, then clearly A is also false, because knowing that not B means that whatever would have caused B is also something that did not happen. Okay, so yes, Alexandria, good question. Modus Tollens is our second example of a hypothetical syllogism. So there's three overall. One is Modus Ponens, one is this Modus Tollens, and then we'll try to get to the third one if we can. No, that's not the case, Julian. The conclusion, the only valid conclusion here is not A specifically. So for example, if I run, then I sweat, but I'm not sweating. And if I'm not sweating, but running causes me to sweat, then we know already, you already know then that I didn't run, okay? If I am in California, then I'm in the United States. You follow me? But suppose that I continued by saying, but I'm not in the United States. Doesn't that imply that I'm not in California? Of course, because if I'm not in the whole country, then I'm also not in any part of it either, right? If I was beheaded, then I would be dead. But I'm not dead. You can see me right here. And therefore, we know that I was not beheaded, because had I been, I would not be alive. But I am alive. So clearly that didn't occur. Okay? Araceli, we have not yet covered the fourth one. So I'll tell you this. Here are the three that we have gone over so far. Disjunctive syllogism, aka argument from elimination. Modus ponens, aka affirming the antecedent. And this is modus tollens, which is also known by a second name. We haven't got the fourth one yet. The fourth one is called a chain argument, okay? But we'll see if I can get to it in the remaining 10 minutes of class. The modus tollens argument is sometimes also called denying the consequent. It's called denying the consequent because of the second premise. On the second premise, the consequent clause has been negated. Okay, so Julian, so if it's stated before in premises, you do not state in the conclusion, at least for modus tollens. The conclusion is not supposed to repeat anything. It's supposed to simply say what follows from the premises. So it wouldn't really be logical to say neither A or B when it's already been mentioned above that not B, and now we also have not A on the third line. Yeah, so it would be in a way redundant. There's no need to mention twice over that not B. So good question, yeah. Yeah, it's called denying the consequent because of this feature, that on the second premise of such an argument, the consequent has been denied. Now, I'm trying to help to prevent you guys from making easy mistakes that are common with these types of examples and arguments. So let me just show you one time what the most prevalent error is in reporting on modus tollens. The most basic error that people make is essentially negating the wrong clause on second line. So this is correct. This version, this is modus tollens. That's the right format right here. But let me show you how it would be done incorrectly. If a person did this, that's not right. That's wrong. This is invalid now. Because the second premise now is negating the antecedent rather than the consequent. And that's not a valid inference. If I'm in California, then I'm in the United States. But if I find out that I'm not in California, that does not imply that I'm not in the whole country, because I could not be in California but still in the United States. Thus, this cannot be deduced from the two statements above. If I was beheaded, then I would be dead. But I have not been beheaded. That does not imply that I didn't die, though. Maybe I didn't get beheaded, but somebody shot me anyway. So there's many different possible ways for the person to still have died, even if they didn't die in that one particular way. Okay, so let me see these. Eric, you say, so not the consequent, so therefore not the antecedent either. Exactly, that's correct, Eric, yes. So the right version, one last time, just to make sure that I leave you with the memory of the correct version here, is we negate the consequent, not B, which leads us to the logical conclusion of not A. Okay, now let's see if any of you guys can quickly just spin off an example of that. Hit me with a quick example of modus tollens now, denying the consequent. So the beginning is going to still have that if-then thing. But after that, you will just continue in the way listed here in the format. So let's see some examples, just to make sure everyone, or at least some of us, could produce those. Could be an example of modus tollens. And yeah, just try to get like all three of the statements in there. in your typed chat, if you could. If I drink coffee, I'll be energetic. I'm not energetic, so I did not drink coffee. That's a good example, Hannah. Yes, it's probably sound as well. Coffee has that little stimulant effect. So supposing that you're lethargic and feeling no energy, you must not have drank coffee, because if you did, then you would have the energy. Okay, if I'm hungry, then I'll eat. I didn't eat, so I'm not. Wait, hold on. If I'm hungry, then I will eat. I didn't eat would imply that I am not hungry. So your conclusion, Eric, is a little off, because remember, the conclusion of the Modus Tollens argument has to deny the antecedent. Don't you follow me? Like, if you're hungry, you would eat. But say you didn't eat, that must mean you don't want the food, because whenever you're hungry, you eat. So you're not eating, you must not be hungry. Okay, Clarissa, if I went to sleep, then I'm tired. I'm not tired, so I did not sleep. Yeah, exactly. Natalie, if I clean my room my mom will let me out. Now, Natalie, error. You have the other version where it's not A, and that's incorrect. So keep in mind, you have to negate the consequent, not the antecedent. So your example would be correct if it said, if I clean my room, my mom will let me out. And then it would say, my mom did not let me out, therefore I did not clean my room. Okay, so I'm glad that I got to see your example, because I want to correct that and make sure that when it counts later, you'll get the right version. Okay, Matthew, if I stepped on a mine, then I would explode. I didn't explode, so I did not step on a mine. Yes. Larissa, if I get a ticket, I'll have to pay a fee. Now, Larissa, your example is incorrect too, because you're negating the wrong part. It has to be the consequent that is denied in Modus Tollens. So just make that note. Adeline, if I go to class, then I'll pass the test. I didn't pass the test, therefore I did not go to class. Exactly, yes. Kayla, if I ditch work, then I'll get fired. I did not get fired, so I did not ditch work. All good, okay, with a few corrections mentioned to those in our chat. Thank you guys for your contributions. More of these hypothetical syllogisms. Maybe I'll be able to quickly talk about it. We'll see what happens in the next few minutes here. So the last member of the hypothetical syllogism family, and this is the fourth of our four. Okay, so here's the four, just to be very clear. Disjunctive syllogism, modus ponens, modus tollens, and then the fourth one now is called chain argument. Okay. Okay, so chain argument is a sequence of conditionals linked together, kind of like almost as though a chain reaction. Okay, so here's how the chain argument goes. In this particular type of valid form, there can actually be more than two premises, but for the sake of brevity, I'm going to leave it at two. And here's the way the form goes. If A, then B. Continuing from there, in the next successive premise, we just have it be the antecedent is the consequent of the previous premise. So it goes as follows. If B, then C, yet a further consequent. Okay? So this says, if A, then B, if B, then C. Now, therefore, what do you think would be the conclusion to this? And the conclusion, I'll just give you a hint, is itself a hypothetical. If A, then B. If B, then C. So therefore, tell me, fill in the blank. The conclusion is going to be a conditional, but what will be the two terms of this final conclusion? If A, then B. If B, then C. Ah, good, Judy. Therefore, if A, then C. It's kind of like in math when you have the transitivity relation. Okay, so if A, then C. Let me give you an example. If I fall off my bike, then I will scrape my knee. And if I scrape my knee, then I'll need a Band-Aid. So if I fall off my bike, then I will need a Band-Aid. If I study hard, then I will get an A on the test. And if I get an A on the test, then I'll pass the class. So if I study hard, then I will pass the class. If I wake up early, then I can beat traffic. And if I beat traffic, then I can be on time to my meeting. So if I wake up early, then I can be on time to my meeting. In all the examples that I'm giving you, we're just plugging in for A, B, and C in that consistent way. The chain argument basically says that if one thing causes another, and that thing causes yet a further thing, then we can conclude that if the initial event occurs, then ultimately the final consequence will result. Okay? So it's kind of almost like dominoes toppling. If domino A falls, it will topple domino B. If domino B falls, it will topple domino C. So if A falls, then so will C. Okay? Now with this chain argument, it's possible for there to be additional premises. Suppose that, just for the sake of discussion, we had another premise here, which said that if C, then D, just extending it a further stage. Then, can you tell me what might be the conclusion of that example? As I've added another premise, the conclusion has to be modified. Now what should the conclusion say of our written example here? It should say, if something, then something, but what are the somethings in this conclusion? If A, then D, that's right. Okay, so if I meet somebody in school, then I'll have a partner, and if I have a partner, then I'll be able to go to the dance. If I go to the dance, then we'll end up getting married. So if I meet someone at school, we'll end up getting married. I don't know, it's just random, but I'm trying to give you examples of things. One thing leads to another, that leads to yet another thing. So ultimately, we can conclude that if the first thing happens, then the final consequence also happens down the line at least. Okay, so I guess I've now been able to actually tell you something about all the forms of deductive. Does it tap out at 3? No, Gabriel, it could be additionally more than 3. It has to be at least 2, but with this chain argument, you can have 3, 4, 5, however many, until we exhaust all the premises. The only rule is that wherever the conclusion comes, it's going to connect the first antecedent with the final consequence. So the initial premise, you're going to look at the first clause, and then you'll zoom down to the last premise, wherever it is, and you'll attach that to the final consequence. It could continue. That's right. Okay, so I'll send you guys the instructions for our first homework then, since I think I've been able to give you enough information to at least get started on it. We can talk about it again when we get a little closer to the key dates, but I'm trying to find the right passage here. I can tell you just once in this recording, I'm letting you go, but yeah, so I'm going to have you do exercise 8.3, part 1, on page 252. So on page 252, section 1, which is A through J, you're going to complete that homework assignment. There's no class on Monday, that's right. I have a little more detail to speak on about that, so I'm going to write it in the message that I send everybody through Titanium. So later tonight or maybe early in the morning, depending on how things play out for me today, I'll send you guys the detailed instructions. But just so you can look at it at least, it's our textbook. It's page 252, exercise 8-3, and it's the first section of it. Okay? So for now anyways, guys, thanks so much for everything. I'll repeat again the homework. It's page 252. It's section 8.3. And it's going to be due as seen in the calendar on that given date. So I think that's Monday the 14th. That's 12 days away from now. Okay? It's page 252, section 8.3, part 1, letter A through J. But don't go ahead and do it until you read my email, because there's some instructions I have to give you about how to make sure it's correct. Okay, guys. Well, thanks again. It will be due through Titanium. You'll return your assignment to me as an email attachment. And I will confirm the receipt of your assignment to me with a reply that I will give. So you will not have any concerns about whether I received it or whether you did submit it on time. Okay? So thanks again, everybody. Have a great day. I appreciate everyone's attendance and all your hard work. So have a good one. Have a great long weekend. Yes, Peachy's going to be free in just a minute. Okay, guys. Take care. I'll see you next time then. Thanks. Thank you.